Are there games that for years you have refused to play for whatever reason? I mean, maybe it just looked ugly and unappealing. The theme didn't catch you whatsoever. Maybe you thought that your taste had evolved past the simplicity of the design, or maybe like myself, you're a board game elitist that listened to the masses around why you shouldn't like a particular game. Or maybe even the game was just too popular and you're a contrarian and you like to play the deep cuts and the cool FOMO niche Kickstarter things that are out there. Whatever reason, are there games out there that you finally played and once you did, it completely opened your mind about a particular genre, game, title, whatever it might be? If you answered yes, you are in the right place, because I have a pretty decent list of games that I can think about that I just didn't play for different reasons over the years. And when I finally did, I really regretted my decision not getting them to the table earlier. And in this video, I'm going to give you 9 games that I finally got to the table and I really enjoyed, or at least really regretted never playing until then. I think the nature of this list is that a lot of these are pretty obvious games. As I say these games, some of you surely out there will be like, what are you talking about? You didn't play that sooner? And you're talking about board games on the internet? Yeah, I know. I'm embarrassed about it. Especially having a channel, I need those references. And this first game is a great example of that. And it's A Quest for El Dorado. A Quest for El Dorado is kind of the quintessential racing game out there. I think a lot of people credit it as being the best racing game, one of the better, if not a lot of people's favorite deck builders. For whatever reason, I just kind of, I guess I walked by it on Target shelves and thumbed my nose up at it because it's just seemed too basic. Shut Up and Sit Down had, a few months back had done a video on it and how much they loved it. And I thought, oh, okay, it's at the hotness right this second. Maybe I need to at least trade for it. So I did. And it's been sitting on my shelf for months. All of a sudden had a chance at a full family game. I don't know what happened. Everyone in the family wanted to play a game. And I thought to myself, I want to play something new. I don't want to play Skull King or Space Base. I need something new in my life if I'm going to actually get a chance to get a family game to the table, but I need something easy enough to learn. And in my view was A Quest for El Dorado. So I quickly looked up a how to play, and it's less than 10 minutes on a how to play. Okay, I'm going to get this thing to the table. I learned it in less than 10 minutes. We got it to the table. Man, it pisses me off that I've had this thing for months. I've known about it for years, and I never played this game. It is wonderful. Deck building racing. I have been a critic of Flamme Rouge. I've been a critic of Heat. Cubitos had its time in our house and left. I guess that's the extent of our racing game experience. I always kind of thought that I should like a racing game. I hadn't quite found that game, and I found that game now in A Quest for El Dorado. This is a wonderful starter game for nearly anyone. It is really simple. And I think of it as simple because we've played a lot of deck building games in general, but it is simple, basic deck building. You start with cards, and cards either help you move around the map or they help you buy better cards, and you just kind of rinse and repeat and get around the map. But there's just so much more to it in the metagame. The metagame comes especially as you start to play these harder map setups. They start to give pinch points in the map and stuff starts to block you, and maybe you make a bad decision and you don't buy the right cards to get across water or the forest or the desert. It does so many things so smart, and it's so simple. The rule set is just, you teach within 5 minutes. We were up and playing and yelling at each other for blocking, yelling at each other for taking the last card. It was an absolute wonderful time. And there is some take that a little bit. It's light take that in that you can definitely block people. I mean, a lot of times it's inadvertent, but there are these pinch points that everyone wants to go through on the map that are much easier instead of having to go and play those really big cards to get through those really hard desert or forest spaces or water spaces, whatever it might be. So that happens, and buying cards that somebody else really needed. There's only 3 copies of each card. Regardless, this was a great time, and I kick myself in the butt for not playing such a fundamentally wonderful game already. And the racing game genre is clearly my favorite. In the deck building genre, it's just great. It's just a great little deck builder. But I'm probably not telling you anything new because you've probably played it. And I guess that's the point of this video. I regret not playing it up until now. Speaking of deck building, Dominion is the quintessential deck builder. And I basically leapfrogged Dominion and went right to Lost Ruins of Arnak, something that has light deck building, admittedly, and it's combined with other things. It makes these little interesting interactions happen. I also went straight to something like Clank a little bit later, eventually doing Imperium Zone and so forth. So I always played deck builders that basically had another mechanic. You were deck building for a reason, and Dominion's kind of reductionist view on that didn't really intrigue me. It's like, oh, okay, I'm just deck building and playing cards. Like, how fun can that be? But it is clear to me when I finally got this to the table, which I don't own, mind you. I never bought it, and I probably won't buy it, by the way. But a friend had it and said, what, you haven't played Dominion? We have to play Dominion. All I do is talk about all these other games, and I haven't even played Dominion, one of the core staples to the deck building genre, and one in which I openly say is one of my favorite mechanics of all time. How have I not played Dominion? And when I played Dominion, I just felt like an absolute idiot. It has so many of the great fundamental deck building components that I know and love, and now it's clear where all of those games got them from. I mean, the idea of being able to draw more cards or play more actions, the idea of taking simple cards and buying more powerful versions so you can get even more powerful cards, this idea of having to make a decision in the game where all of a sudden you stop buying cards that are action cards in your deck. They're going to help you do more stuff, and then starting and buying points, essentially. All of those kind of core components are more or less in most deck building games up to different extents. But it is clear to me now, like everyone said, where they came from. And did I have fun playing this really, what is essentially a pretty simple deck builder? Absolutely. I had a great time. I took to it really quickly, mind you, because I'd played other more advanced deck building things. But it is one of those kind of kick myself in the butt moments. Like, how have I not played this thing? Speaking of foundational board games, Catan. Catan is another one that I was an absolute elitist. I believed Reddit and I believed the forums on Board Game Geek and other creators that Catan sucks. It doesn't suck. There's a reason why it's sold millions and millions of copies. It's a fun game. I think it gets a bad rap for dice. You know, you are at the mercy of rolling dice and hoping that you have the settlements and the roads in the right place to be able to give you the resources related to the roll. That does suck, you know. It's really a game about that dice roll mitigation and trying to vary your settlements and build your network so you can actually get stuff on each and every roll. I think the other kind of feel bad mechanic that some people might point to, board game elitists that like perfect information and not to have their plans foiled, is the mechanic around rolling a 7 and losing some of your cards. I remember when somebody introduced me to this game, finally, and they told me about that 7 roll mechanic and then the robber and stuff. Like, that's not fair. That sucks. And I think that's what it comes down to. I think there are some things that aren't fair, but for what it is, giving you network building, negotiation, the excitement of dice rolls and seeing what happens, I think there is something that is inherently exciting about each and every turn. It reminds me a lot of Space Base, where you are dealing with kind of dice roll mitigations and building out all of your card tableau and being able to hit on other people's turns. All of that is fun and exciting, and I like that game. So why should I poo-poo Catan? I shouldn't. It's good. Will I own it? Probably not. Will I play it when somebody asks me to play it? Yeah. And I won't scoff any longer. I won't laugh and go like, there's got to be a better game than that. I won't say that anymore. I will play Catan. Speaking of dice rolling, Castles of Burgundy. In Castles of Burgundy, you're building a duchy board with all of these different tiles. They all do different things. They all have different scoring. You're rolling dice and using those dice values to acquire these tiles or do other actions. The interesting thing for me is how each of these duchy boards are set up. They will ask for a different strategy and kind of different progression in how you want to build out that duchy, because they do give you, different benefits and different scoring and scoring by round changes. So there's a really interesting puzzle there. I think this one does suffer a little bit as well from kind of the luck of the roll. There is some mitigation there, but you are having to spend an action to get those mitigations on those dice rolls. Sometimes you just really need that 3 roll and you get a 6 and you don't have the workers or villagers, whatever they're called, to mitigate that roll, and you're kind of screwed. I think some people don't also like the idea of other people going and taking that tile they really needed to complete their duchy or their scoring or whatever it might be. But regardless, it's an absolute absolute brilliant game. I think in general, this is not a hot take. There are plenty of board game elitists that still do like Castles of Burgundy. I actually didn't even give it a chance. And this might have been the first example where I really gave kind of an older board game a chance, because I was really stuck in the Kickstarter FOMO loop, especially when I started kind of my board game loving career. I think a lot of people do that, but lucky for me, an old game nested with Kickstarter FOMO in Awaken Realms version, and I backed that. And when it finally came, I go, why haven't I played this game? It's so absolutely wonderful. It's a game that to this day has probably had the most family plays. I have gotten a little bit bored of it, but it's a game that I will play at any time when anyone asks. I won't roll my eyes to it. I will set it up and get it to the table. The next 4 games are kind of all related to the same thing, or at least impetus to me playing them. Nucleum came out, and when Nucleum came out, there was a lot of talk around its comparisons to Barrage and Brass. I traded for Barrage and Brass immediately. I had pre-ordered Nucleum. My plan was to get them all to the table, play them, and do the comparison that everyone else was doing. I didn't end up doing that, so then I started to think about, what can I do with all of these games that I have? And I kind of came up with a brilliant idea. I was like, hey, can I actually possibly disprove Brass as not being the best game in the world? At heart, I am a contrarian, and I would love to make the video saying that Brass is not the best game in the world. And in doing so, my plan was to get some of the best network builders together and play them all and just find one of those that was better than Brass. Fast forward to now. Now I have Brass, Barrage, Concordia, Gaia Project, among others. None of these interested me in the least bit, other than to make the comparison and contrarian video about how Brass sucks. Spoiler alert, Brass doesn't suck. None of these suck. They're all ranked in the top 50 probably, I don't know, for a reason. They're all pretty awesome. And I didn't realize that this genre, I guess, of network building, even though all of these do it so different, I would like so much. Barrage was just so unique. It's, you're basically building these little power plants and dams and funneling water down and trying to capture the water droplets and produce energy and fulfill contract. And then it has this little wheel that it basically puts all of your construction pieces on a cool off timer. Once it finally comes back around, you can use them again to build more stuff. I actually played Barrage the most, I believe it on BGA. And that's where I kind of fell in love with the game. And I obviously own it now. So, it's another one of those that if I wasn't doing it for a video, I probably wouldn't have picked up. But it's absolutely wonderful. Another one was Gaia Project. And Gaia Project has been a little bit of a journey for me. It's actually a really hard game. It's a really heavy game in my mind. Not necessarily for kind of like rule overhead. It's getting the game to do what you want using your faction's special power, essentially. And I found that difficult on a lot of factions. And I finally got a particular faction that I figured out how to make work. But in general, what you're doing is trying to colonize a galaxy, and it's an engine builder of sorts, because as you build out certain things from your board, you're getting more resources as kind of an income. But the tricky part is you're upgrading these built pieces, and when you upgrade, the blast piece goes back on your board, covering another spot. So your resource or engine building is constantly in flux. So you're always taking that into account when you have to build new things. It is a network builder, and you're trying to kind of string all of these different buildings together. There's variable goals, there's variable round goals. There's always something that you're working towards in a different manner. The factions in which you're playing against all do things slightly differently. Like one, in fact, that I just played that I really enjoyed is I could actually build my stuff on other people's planets to thoroughly piss them off. There's a wide variety of these powers. There's definitely asymmetry. It's not like root level asymmetry, but it's just enough to completely change the strategy and the way in which you play the game. This is a game I'll probably be playing for a really long time and never fully understand it. I love it, and I play it a ton on BGA, and I would probably play it even more if I had a consistent group to play with, because it is one of those games that I think really benefits through a lot of different plays over a long period of time. The other network builder was Concordia, and this was actually the most recent discovery in this network builder area. I've actually had Concordia Venus sitting in my garage, ready to play for a really long time. And oddly, I saw it go on sale on Steam, and I actually played the digital version, and I kicked myself in the butt for not playing this thing. It might be one of my favorites, if not the favorite of all of these. I don't know. I haven't gotten enough plays in, but it's a deck builder, network building, expand and conquer, build stuff, resource generation. But the thing that really gets me are the cards that you're buying, the cards that you're building in your deck are related as a multiplier to these different scoring elements in the game. So not only are you buying more cards to do more stuff, you're buying those cards to actually help your scoring. So similar to the Dominion kind of point where you have to start buying cards for the sake of scoring rather than the sake of doing stuff. That moment absolutely happens in Concordia, where you are now all of a sudden looking at the type of card, not just what they're doing, because the type of card is related to the actual goal, and then buying that type of card to get that multiplier as high as possible. I did an awful job of explaining what the game is. No Pun did a really great big video on this, and I'll kind of probably point you there if you want to learn more about it. Regardless, this was a big surprise. The theme, the cover, all of that stuff just kind of screamed boring to me. And then I played and I was like, oh, okay. I'm an idiot once again. Don't judge a book by its cover. When all said and done, this might be my favorite network builder of all time. But the best network builder of all time clearly is Brass Birmingham, right? It's the #1 game in the world. Can I prove that wrong here? No, I can't. And it's another one that just sat there forever since I didn't get it to the table to do the Nucleum comparison. I just thought, it's just too much to learn. It's got to be too heavy. I really don't want to play it. My wife's never going to want to play this thing. But then the Steam app went on sale, and I bought that, and I just played the tutorial, and it absolutely clicked for me. I get it now. The card play is wonderful. Upgrading the different kind of resource types is great. The idea of selling them to the market and connecting the network to do so, and then flipping the tiles to get the points. When you build the thing, it's only potential points. There's just so much to think about when you first look at your hand of cards. That hand of cards has tons of potential in it, but it's your job to kind of, in your mind at least, put together a progression of actions to do what you want to do, but then other people get in your way. Because very much so, this is a, and it's inadvertent maybe, or sometimes on purpose, but there are take that elements in blocking, and you can put yourself into you get completely blocked and you don't have the right cards and you can't expand any longer and do what you need to do. There's this idea of needing to have beer to use to sell different things to the market. I have no idea why that is in the game thematically, but it is an interesting twist in needing to have the beer out there, being able to use other people's beer. And if you can't sell certain things. I feel like this game right out of the gates can absolutely overwhelm people. And it did me, because you have a ton of cards in your hand. They're all related to cities. There's also some generic resource cards. There's so many different possibilities you can use. There's just a lot of decision space here. I don't know if it's the best game of all time, but is it the best network builder at least? I certainly can't disprove that at this point. Is it the one I enjoy the most? I don't know. I probably would have said yes until I recently discovered Concordia. It's one of those things, like, who knows what I'm going to discover next? Like, when I finally get Power Grid to the table, is that going to be the one? Probably not. Regardless, it's just another game that I kick myself in the butt for not playing any sooner. It's obviously great. And the last one on this list is the most recent game. So I didn't kick myself for too long. I mean, when this game came out, another game very much sort of like it came out, in Lost Ruins of Arnak. And Lost Ruins of Arnak, thematically, just spoke to me much more so than Dune Imperium, the game we're talking about. Dune Imperium, I ignored for a long time. I hadn't read the books, and at that point, oddly enough, the movie hadn't come out, and the artwork was from the movie. I didn't have any sort of connection to it. I think a lot of people early on were definitely leaning towards Lost Ruins of Arnak, and at least I believe the content creators I was watching at the time were really deciding between Dune Imperium, Lost Ruins of Arnak, and Endless Winter as which one is going to be the best worker placement deck building game, because they all kind of came out at the same exact time with this new combination that hadn't really been seen before. Regardless, I picked Lost Ruins of Arnak, and if you've watched my video on Lost Ruins of Arnak, you know I absolutely love that game. It has its quirks and flaws, but it is one I love. I finally said, shut up, everyone, stop yelling at me about Dune Imperium. I will get this thing to the table. And I mean, it's probably been a year now or whatever it might be. I played a ton. I have all the expansions. I do have Uprising sitting on the shelf doing the same thing that the original did. Just stare at me and say, you probably need to play me. And everyone says this is the better version. It's still on the block, and maybe I'll make a video on that in the future. But Dune Imperium's a great game. It's a deck building game, worker placement game. I do think knowing kind of the lore, the story, watching the movies, it does help with enjoyment, I think, because you kind of understand why you're doing what you're doing. But if you've never seen the movie, it's still an absolutely wonderful game. You might not understand why you're building the deck the way you are, or why the different factions act in the way that they do. I think it's a better deck builder than Lost Ruins of Arnak. I think there's more ways to kind of see more cards. I find the synergies in the cards to be a little bit better. Overall, like the combat mechanic that's added in there, on top of kind of going up the what is really a tech track, similar to, I guess, the equivalent in Lost Ruins of Arnak would be the temple tracks. That combat mechanic adds a lot. And just suffice it to say, when I finally played it, I go, oh yeah, this probably is the better of the two between Lost Ruins of Arnak. Just fundamentally, I still enjoy them both, and maybe that's a video in the future as well. But once again, I kicked myself in the butt for not playing this thing any sooner and not listening to the reviews, because since then it's eclipsed Lost Ruins of Arnak in ranking and plays. It's just a much more popular game. That is it. That is the 9 games that I absolutely kick myself in the butt for not playing. A decent amount of them will be staples in my collection forever, and the others will at least be really good references for any other game I play in the future. So I have that historical reference on, you know, why these games might look the way they do. And what is it from you? What are those games that you just waited on forever? You finally got to the table, and now they are the best thing since sliced bread, or at least something that you really appreciate now more so than before you had played it. And with all of that said, thank you very much for being here. Have yourself a great week.